Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. The first time I saw a corpse move, it was in my morgue, under my lights, on a night I thought would be quiet. I'd taken the night shift at the Cook County Medical Examiner's office because silence was my currency. No ringing phones, no nosy auditors, no one breathing down my neck except the dead. The place is tucked into the Illinois Medical District near Stroger Hospital and the VA, connected by service corridors and tunnels you only learn after years of winter nights. My name's Daniel Reyes, forensic pathologist, 5 years board certified, former internal medicine, until I traded living patients for ones that couldn't argue. Usually, my worst problems were fatigue, a careless slip with a number 22 blade, or a rib that cracked the wrong way under the shears. But that Tuesday stopped feeling usual the moment the first gurney off the garage elevator came with a Department of Public Health slip clipped to the body bag. 3 words in bold that made me stop cold. Respiratory cluster. Hold for review. The bag had rolled up from what the hospital politely called their flu ward, though anyone who walked past those triage tents knew better. Otis Bell, the night security officer, buzzed the elevator through and gave me a wave from his glass booth. He'd been on the job for years, a big man with a bad knee from an old fall, but sharper than most people gave him credit for. His voice crackled over the wall intercom as the elevator doors slid open, a transport tech wheeling the gurney toward me. "Doc, I got 3 more staged at the loading zone if you want to sign now," he said. "They want the garage cleared. Ventilators are coming in from the warehouse." I signed for the first bag, checked the toe tag through the clear panel, and read the name. Aaron Brown, male, 38, found unresponsive in the flu ward isolation room 9 minutes after ambulation. Pronounced in the ward, not transported. No intubation attempts. Triaged earlier in the day for high fever, confusion, and what the nurse recorded as pacing behavior with sudden stops. No family contact listed. Past medical, unknown. There was a brief line that bothered me more than the red stamp. Observed intermittent twitching of distal extremities in post-mortem interval. In our notes that usually meant residual electrical discharges. Reflex arcs. Not unheard of. What made it odd was the time code. Twitching recorded 12 minutes after pronouncement. The diner on duty was Lila Nguyen, a night owl graduate student who worked here for the experience and the extra pay. She had already numbered the rack slot for Brown and clicked the stainless door open on cooler B. When she rolled the gurney toward the opening, I put a hand out. "Hold a second," I said. He came with a note. She read it over my shoulder, made a face, and nodded. We both had the same thought. If the ward was sending warnings like this, we should start with the examination in the isolation suite. The suite is a negative pressure room within the autopsy floor, with its own entry, HEPA exhaust, and a double set of steel doors that seal when the lockdown lever is thrown. It's designed for suspected airborne pathogens, not for anything more dramatic than that. We moved the bag past the regular stations and into the isolation suite, doing the donning drill by muscle memory, hairnet, shoe covers, fluid-resistant gown, cut-resistant gloves under nitrile, face shield over N95. A powered air-purifying respirator was hanging in its rack, but I didn't take it. If the ward was calling this flu, the N95 and shield would be enough for now. I hit the recorder and spoke the entry. Case number 2307 Brown Aaron. External exam only at initiation. Transport from flu ward. Note of postmortem twitching. Lila zipped the bag to mid-chest and folded the flaps, tucking them underneath to keep the field clear. The body was cooling, but not cold. Lividity fixed along the back. Rigor partial in the jaw, full in the upper extremities. There was dried saliva around the mouth and dried mucus on the nose, the kind you see with hard breathing. Fingertips showed grit and cracked cuticles, consistent with agitation. I checked pupils, mid-range, unreactive. Skin had a fine rash along the clavicle, maybe heat rash or drug-related. I looked for needle marks and found none. There was a crescent of broken skin on the left forearm, like a scratch. No sign of defensive wounds. Lila measured, photographed, recorded. We were talking in low voices about whether to call the ward for a quick history when his left index finger made a small, deliberate tap against the table. Not a jerk, a tap. We both saw it. Lila's eyes flicked up to mine behind the shield. Reflexes can look purposeful if you want them to. I told myself that and leaned in. The hand was cooling, the skin slightly mottled. I pressed the nail bed and watched for refill. No perfusion. I set 2 fingers on the radial artery anyway. Nothing. Document the movement, I said. Mark the time. She did, her pen making careful strokes, the kind of writing people use when they're trying not to tremble. I decided to proceed with the external, then take a core sample and swabs. The medical director had asked for viral swabs and a standard panel if anyone from the ward came down with anomalies. Lila handed me the swab kit, and I opened the mouth with a tongue depressor. There was a faint smell that I didn't like. Not decay, not yet, but something sweet like ketones and something metallic like old coins. I collected the swabs and labeled them. The finger tapped again. Then the hand flexed with a fast, unnatural snap, and the arm came off the table like someone pulling a marionette string. Lockdown lever, I said, too calm for how my chest felt. Lila threw it. The inner door thunked into place with its hydraulic seal, and the fan speed picked up as the negative pressure increased. I took the blood draw kit with my left hand, and the reflex hammer with my right for lack of something better, and stepped to the head of the table. I watched the chest for movement. Nothing. Then the jaw twitched, and the mouth opened half an inch, teeth touching, tongue moving like something tasting the air. I said the thing I still hate hearing in my own recording, because I said it like an order instead of a question. Brown, can you hear me? The face didn't turn. The eyes didn't track. The mouth opened a fraction more. The sound that came out wasn't breath. There was no chest rise. It was a wet click from the throat. Fast. 3, 4 in a row. The left hand clawed. The right followed with a delay. When people talk about reanimation like it's mythology, they forget how clinical it looks in the first second. Not theatrical, not cinematic, just movement without the system that should be powering it. Lila said my name once, bare and flat, like a smoke alarm beep. Then the body snapped at the waist, a whip-crack convulsion that brought shoulders off the slab and heels banging against steel. The jaw gaped wide and then closed as if the ligaments remembered what biting meant. I stepped back and picked up the nearest real tool, the oscillating autopsy saw we use for calvarium cuts. It was plugged in with the vacuum shroud attached, the hose coiled, the switch off. In training, we joke you never fire it near soft tissue. That day, we didn't joke. Otis, are you on? I hit the intercom button mounted by the glove rack. His voice came with the crackle of an older receiver. On, he said. You all right up there? His booth camera looks down the main autopsy floor, not the isolation room. He couldn't see us. We might have a problem. Initiating a hold. Don't open the main doors for anyone unless I confirm by name. Repeat my name. He repeated it without arguing. He was old school. He liked procedures because they saved him from other people's bad decisions. On the table, Brown made a motion that pushed every rational explanation out of the room. He kicked to turn, rolled to his side, teeth clicking, arms jerking toward the nearest heat source. Lila wasn't in his grasp line because she'd moved to the wall when I told her, smart and quiet. I kept the saw low and reached for the restraint straps we use when we need a body steady. He moved too fast to cinch anything. He came off the table with a slick metal shriek and hit the floor on knees and elbows, mouth chewing at air. There is a kind of speed that looks wrong even when it's not fast by athlete standards. It's the speed that ignores pain and coordination, the kind that keeps momentum after joints should have folded. He came at my right boot and I backed to keep my distance. The saw takes a second to spin up. I didn't have a full second. I grabbed a stainless basin and shoved it into his face. The rim knocked his teeth. He bit at it, enamel squealing on steel, and I used that half beat to pull the saw trigger and feel the buzz through the handle. Lila had her hand on the isolation room alarm. She didn't hit it. Not yet. She watched me and the thing that had been Aaron Brown. There's no way to talk about what happened next without making it sound like something else. The saw is designed to cut bone with minimal spray when used with the vacuum. In soft tissue, it's messy even with the shroud. I didn't aim to destroy. I aimed to disable. I struck for the lower jaw, laterally, to break the bite, and for the ulnar when he grabbed the saw housing with his right hand. The oscillation chewed through tendons in a way that made my stomach knot. He didn't react like a person. No recoil, no cry, no flinch. He only changed direction, coming again, faster. I used the table as a barrier and circled. He slammed into it hard enough to ring the steel. "Hit the alarm," I said. Lila did. The red stack light outside the isolation suite began to spin. Somewhere in the building, the security system logged an internal biohazard. Triple seal lockdown is not dramatic. There is no big clang. There is only the thud of heavier door bolts and a low buzz that tells you have fewer options than you did a minute ago. The overhead fan roared louder. The thing on our floor scrambled. He moved for the space along the wall, where the table didn't reach, dragging a hand that no longer had tendons to grip. We had one more barrier, a rolling instrument cart with a brake. Lila kicked the brake off and shoved the cart across the gap. He slammed into it, teeth snapping the air. I threw a strap around the cart leg and the table leg and yanked tight. Not secure forever, but secure for seconds. In a night like that, seconds are currency. I told Lila to get behind me and cut the overhead lights to low. I wanted his vision less than ours. I kept the saw up and reached with my left hand to the oxygen shut-off knob. I don't like feeding oxygen into a room with sparks and a spinning blade. "Otis," I said into the intercom again. "You still on?" His answer was closer to the speaker, as if he'd leaned in. "I'm on. Lock the garage access. Nobody in without my voice. We have a reanimation event in isolation." There was a long second, and then a sound I'd never heard from him. A soft exhale like someone taking a seat after bad news. "Copy," he said. "Garage sealed. Doc, do I call upstairs?" Upstairs meant the director and the county liaison. If I said yes, it would bring half the city by morning, if morning came normal. "Call the director's line," I said, "but keep the hospital out for 5 minutes. I need to know what we have." We had what we had. Fast, directed movement from a body with no heartbeat, no respiration, and the wrong metabolism. The old rulebook didn't help. New rules form fast when survival is on the line. First rule, distance. Second rule, disable mobility before anything else. Third rule, do not let the cooler doors open. I looked at the stainless bank. Cooler B held 12 bodies, 4 from the flu ward that evening alone. If what was on our floor was inside those doors, we had a mass event. I told Lila what to grab and how to move. She didn't waste words arguing because her brain is a survivor's brain. It prefers the task that exists over the one it wants. She slid along the wall and pulled the wheeled body lift from its charging station. It's a motorized post with a swing arm and straps, usually used to move heavy decedents with one person. Tonight it would be a door brace, a mobile shield, and a battering ram if we had to. The thing on the floor changed direction with her movement, scraping a knee, leaving a smear that I forced myself not to examine. It launched at the lift and hit the post with a sound like a tuning fork, mouth clamped, legs churning. I stepped in and hit the shoulder with the saw. The oscillations tore fabric, then skin, then the fascia under it. The body jerked but didn't recoil. I drove the lift arm down and pinned the torso to the floor with it, straps cinched under Lila's quick hands. He kept moving. He moved until the strap pressure made movement pointless. When he stopped, it wasn't because he felt a limit. It was because he found a different way to work. He turned his head and tried to bite the strap. His jaw had lost leverage after my first strike. He used what was left. We left him there, not because we wanted to, but because the sound through the cooler door told us we were already behind. I had never heard cooler doors vibrate from the inside. They did now. Not all of them. 2, then 3. Then something like a knuckle drum along the full width of the stainless. Lila looked at me, and I shook my head hard. "Do not open," I said. The stupidest instruction in the world and the only one that mattered. She swallowed and nodded. Outside the isolation room, the main autopsy floor was empty under low light. The camera in the corner blinked red for record. I thought about cutting it. Then I didn't. Records matter even when you hope no one sees them. The striker saw cord dragged behind me, arcing water droplets from the vacuum shroud. I unplugged it and set it aside for the battery-powered bone saw we keep for fieldwork. It's slower, but untethered. I grabbed rib shears, a scalpel, and a box of tourniquets because straps are straps. Lila pushed the lift like a riot shield. We moved together, slow, communicating with glances and two-word cues. The first cooler door that jumped in its frame was door 3, top row, left side. The magnetic seal held, but the handle rattled. I said the name written on the card slot, Lam Danielle. I say this because people think it's easier if you don't. It isn't. You can pretend all you want. You still know there was a person before the label. Lila handed me a roll of industrial tape and a trauma strap, and I made a fast X across the handle and around the hinge side. Not perfect. Something to slow a charge if the seal failed. We did the ones that rattled first, then the ones that were only thumping, then we did all of them. By the time we finished, sweat stung my eyes behind the shield, and the saw felt heavy even in my good hand. The building made a new sound then, the sound of the outer lockdown fully engaging. That happens when security hits the big switch after an internal alarm stacks with an external. Otis had made his calls. Maglocks locked, roll-down shutters rolled. Even the ambulance bay shutters would be down. The little things you don't notice on a tour suddenly matter more than what floor you're on. We were inside with whatever was changing in our cooler and whoever could get to us through the tunnels. The intercom cracked. "Doc," Otis said. "I got the director's voicemail. I got her deputy. He told me to sit tight, told me you'd call, told me to keep the garage closed. Then he asked me what kind of movement, and I told him the wrong kind. You want me to get you up through the elevator?" The elevator would bring us to his booth. The elevator opens on the garage, then the badge door opens to the outside. Under lockdown, the badge door is dead. "If you bring us up and we can't get out," I said, "we just move the problem to you. Stay in your booth. Can you watch the tunnel cams?" He grunted. "I can see the corridor outside your floor. I can see the stair. The hospital side locked. I got one engineer moving across the far hall like he's late for a party. He's the only one dumb enough to still be here besides me." "That's Manny," Lila said quietly. "Manuals." Manny was a plant engineer who called electrical schematics manuals, like they were instruction books you could follow if you just read slow. He'd helped me once with a blown breaker during a storm. I pictured him with his tool belt crossing a corridor he didn't deserve to die in. "If he gets near our door, patch him through," I told Otis. "Do not open anything for him. He'll understand if he's close enough to hear what's in here." We needed to reduce the number of variables. Variable 1, movement inside the cooler. Variable 2, the isolation room subject still working under the lift. Variable 3, unknown contact from outside staff who might try to help and make everything worse. Variable 4, if the hospital started pushing cases down the tunnel in panic. I told Lila we were going to create a choke and make this floor a compartment we could hold. We pulled stainless tables into a V pointed at the only door that could open to the corridor. We strapped the legs together, braced with supply bins, and slid the wheeled gurneys behind as a second line. I took the emergency shower pipe wrench from its hook to use as a lever and left the bone saw charged at my right hand. We worked until the camera light made me nervous, and then we worked past that. The first cooler door failed at the lower hinge with a sound like tearing cloth. The seal held the top for 2 more seconds. Then the slab swung out and the body slipped from its tray and hit the floor shoulder first. It was a young man in a patient gown. He moved before he finished sliding, palms slapping and pushing like a sprinter out of blocks. Lila yelled a single word that I don't remember and dropped the lift arm to block his line while I stepped in and took his knee from the side with the wrench. It didn't stop him like it should have. It turned him, slowed him half a breath, and half a breath was enough for the second strap to go tight around his upper torso. He twisted, teeth hitting the metal column with a clack. I felt heat come off him like a furnace door. The second cooler door failed 2 minutes later. Then the third failed without banging, like the person inside had just waited and listened, then used hands on the middle of the seal and rolled the gasket like escape artists do with duct tape. I knew the instant I saw the move that whatever this pathogen was doing, it wasn't turning people into slow caricatures. It was finding the motor programs built for survival and clearing out everything in the way. Pain, hesitation, fear, all switched off like tripping a breaker. What remains is intent. We learned as we fought. Long tools for reach, straps for control, avoid getting pinned in a corner, hit joints from the side, tie off to anchored steel. Keep your partner in your left peripheral, not your right, so the dominant hand stays clear for action. It sounds clinical now, because that's who I am, but nothing about it was calm. It was sweat, noise, metal, the slap of bare feet on tile, the animal sound of effort, and the little clicks their throats made when their mouths weren't clamping down. Lila was a better partner than half the residents I've ever had in a surgical theater because she didn't freeze. When I said move, she moved. When she said now, I already had the tool up. We brought 3 into restraint within 10 minutes. Brown was still working under the lift in the isolation room, straps sawing grooves in the post as he twisted. We shifted our barricade tighter and taped our hands into our gloves because sweat was making the nitrile slip. My face shield had a star of something on it I didn't name. Under the low light, their eyes reflected deep, dry, and focused. I won't tell you they looked empty. They didn't. Empty would have been a mercy. They looked like concentration without conscience. Otis came on again, with the voice that meant he was watching something he didn't like. Doc, I got 3 in the corridor, hospital side. They do not look like visitors. They move too fast for visitors. He wasn't one for embellishment. They at your door in 20 seconds. I told Lila to fall back to the V and tie off the right leg with the orange strap we hadn't used. I took the left, wrench up. The corridor door is solid, badge swiped from both sides. Under lockdown, the internal side responds to our badge if the central allows it. It wouldn't open for them. It didn't matter. The first impact bowed the door in its frame. The second made the top hinge spit 2 screws. I rotated the wrench for leverage and braced on my heel. The third blow put a hand through the wire-reinforced glass like a piston. The hand withdrew, then came again, knuckles leaving streaks. The fourth impact cracked the glass and bowed the steel more. Otis, I said, kill corridor lights. He did. The hall went dark, and our floor glowed dim and low. The next impact was less sure. The thing on the other side of the door put its face to the glass and peered in through the refraction, not squinting, not blinking. Then the hand came again for the latch. It didn't know the badge reader. It knew the lever. It pulled hard enough to threaten metal. Lila made a sound that was more effort than fear, tightened the strap on her side, and nodded at me. Ready. The door finally broke not at the lock, but at the mid-frame, right where the metal had been cut to install the badge reader panel. The whole assembly tore in a diagonal. The first infected through was a nurse from the ward, her badge still on a retractable clip, her forearm scored by parallel marks as if she'd tried to pull someone off her. She covered half the distance to the V before I met her at the point with the wrench. She didn't stop. I took her at the thigh, then the shoulder. Lila took her with the lift crossbar under the clavicles, and we leveraged her to the floor as a second body slammed into the barricade. Then a third crawled over him on hands and insteps with an efficient feral crawl that belonged on a training field. It got close and then nowhere because the V is geometry, not drama. The point forced it to choose left or right. When it chose left, it gave me its profile. And profiles are what you want against something that only knows forward. I used the wrench, then the strap, then my knee against stainless for leverage, apologizing out loud without words. Lila cursed once, in Vietnamese, a word that carried more weariness than heat. We held. We couldn't hold forever. I knew it the way you know how long your hand can stay under hot water. The count runs down on its own. I needed friction in our favor, something to slow their momentum. The floor drain gave me an idea I don't love putting in print. It was the bleach. Every morgue has bulk disinfectant in 5-gallon carboys, plus smaller bottles at each station. I told Lila to grab bleach and a mop bucket and not ask. She did. When she came back, I told her to pour along the tile outside the V until the floor shined. The smell hit like a train. It made my eyes water. It also made the tile slick. The fourth infected in the door hit that tile at sprint and went flat, sliding into the V on elbows, forearms squeaking. He still came, but he came slower. The fifth fell over him and tangled. We made distance into time, and time into options. Options. We needed a place to stage restraints, and a place we could reduce the numbers without turning this floor into a place no one could ever stand again. Cremation is not part of a county morgue's workflow. We don't burn, we package, we test, we release. But we do have a hazardous waste autoclave big enough for body bags, used for oversized biohazard from hospitals when their units fail. I toured it once. Old, steam-powered, designed to sterilize, not destroy. It still held heat. Heat and pressure do things to pathogens. Maybe not enough. Maybe exactly enough. I told Lila the plan in nouns, not verbs, because verbs mean time and time we didn't have. Autoclave, transfer, sequence. She nodded like she had done this before in a different life. We pulled the first restrained body to the wall, then the second. We moved like stagehands striking a set, no wasted steps. The corridor offered a new noise, more feet at a pace that belonged to a crowd. The bleach bought us 3 more minutes, then 2, then a handful of seconds. The intercom cracked. Otis. Doc. I got Manny on the phone. He says the main building is a mess. Says do not come out. Says they're moving like video sped up. Says he can give you steam. Steam? Manuel says he can bring the autoclave online from the plant, Otis said. He'll vent it to the roof. He says 30 minutes to pressure. Tell him 20, I said. Not because I believed it, but because I needed to pull on something. Otis, who had spent 30 years being lied to by people up and down the chain, said, Copy, he'll try. We made transfers we'll never forget. We used the lift for the first 2, then a folded gurney to push bodies along the slick strip of tile. We cinched straps until we couldn't get fingers under them. We got hands bitten, not ours, but the straps, the lift bars, anything that came close. Lila kept a roll of duct tape hanging from her wrist like a bracelet and slapped strips across mouths when she could. It helped enough. We staged 3 bodies outside the autoclave, and I gave thanks to the engineer who'd insisted on floor drains in that corner. The autoclave door is a wheel you spin until the lugs line and seal. It takes effort. My forearms shook. Inside, they fought the straps with a persistence that made my teeth ache just to watch. I closed the door because whether it would do anything or not, I couldn't watch that and work the next move. We needed more help than bleach and geometry. We needed something that would thin a rush without bullets. The only gas line I trusted inside this room was the CO2 cylinder we kept for a spectroscopy rig and for a few odd tasks. CO2 displaces oxygen and makes humans tired fast. It won't stop something that's not using its lungs right, but it slows everything in the room that still depends on air. I opened the valve a crack and watched the room monitor. The concentration ticked up. Lila looked at me, and then looked at the monitor, and then kept working. I've never respected anyone more in a span of 30 seconds. The corridor door widened with each hit. The bleach zone dulled under bare feet. The V held because physics is a friend who never asks about your morals. We got the 4th body loaded and the 5th staged when the isolation room gave a sound like a metal groan. Brown had butted the lift post across the tile inch by inch, carving a shallow trench. He had no leverage, no tendons on one side, and still he worked the strap against the housing like he was ratcheting. I put a second strap around the base, anchored to the leg of the sink. Lila double-knotted it. He turned his head to look at the knot like understanding was some part of what he had left. We ran the first autoclave cycle as soon as the gauge hit the green. Manny must have bled heat from the rest of the plant to give us steam that fast. I said his name into the intercom and told him he was saving lives. He didn't answer. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he was giving somewhere else a chance. The cycle timer clicked a relentless metronome. The wheel on the door spun under my hand. Heat bled through the insulation. In the corridor, metal clanged again and again and again. We needed a break point, a real one, something that would force a pause in their pressure. The morgue layout gave me one last trick. The emergency fire door to the stairwell is metal with a hydraulic closer. If we could bait a few into the stair, we could wedge the door with the lift and use gravity. Not to drop them, to force them to climb, again and again, over an obstacle they couldn't coordinate with speed alone. I told Lila. She shook her head once, not no, but testing the geometry in her mind. We do it, she said. We do it once. Once was enough when you were counting seconds. We pulled the V a foot back on each side. We left the bleach dull and the path clear between the gurneys to the stair door. I opened the door and propped it with the lift in a way that left a narrow funnel. Then I stepped forward as bait, the worst kind, the kind that trusts its partner and a trigonometry problem. They took it, 3 at once, 2 slamming into the left leg, 1 into the right. The first got up the first stair like a dog, head leading, hands digging, legs pushing. I let him get his hands on the second step, and then I dropped the lift just enough to catch him at the waist. The others piled. The hydraulics hissed. The wedge held. I slammed the door with the lift locked under the handle and heard the thumping change from forward to trapped, a sound that is worse and better at once. We didn't celebrate. We used the seconds and reset the V and pushed the 5th body into the autoclave staging corner. I watched the gauge climb, then clicked the wheel to seal. My hands shook, but not with panic, with plain exertion. My shirt stuck under the gown. The N95 had cut lines into my face. Lila's eyes were red, not from crying. From air that was wrong. I cracked the CO2 valve shut a hair to keep both of us from getting stupid. That was when the radio on the wall I never use, the hospital emergency channel, barked a code and a plain voice that had dropped past panic into task. This is Ward C. If anyone is on this frequency, be advised we have patient movement consistent with stimulant overdose, without stimulant administration. We have staff movement. We have doors down. Do not open your doors. Repeat. Do not open. A second voice tried to speak. Garble, then a crash, then static. I reached to kill the radio because information I couldn't act on would make me slow. I left it on because memory is the only thing that keeps the next person alive. The autoclave cycle beeped done. I cracked the door 1 notch and a wash of heavy air rolled out. Lila flinched backward from heat, then leaned in with me. Inside, the straps had melted into edges. The bodies had not become anything else. This wasn't a movie. But they didn't move anymore. I closed my eyes because my brain offered me the worst thought of the night. That the thing the steam had killed wasn't a virus or a parasite, but the motor program itself. Then I opened my eyes and said a small practical prayer to Manny, to steam, to physics. We loaded the next and the next. When I think about cruelty from that night, I don't think of teeth or blows. I think of choice. Every choice forces a mean trade. We staged the infected nurse last because her badge might get someone to try the door, and we needed her on this side of it. That is cruel. We strapped a man to the lift who might have been breathing 15 minutes earlier and used him like a post to save 3 more minutes. That is cruel. We listened to fists on metal and left them to hit until they couldn't. That is cruel. But the line in medicine that matters is the one that leaves the most living people at the end, and lines are drawn in ink you can't wash off. After the 3rd cycle, the corridor grew quiet. Not silent. Quiet like the storm had moved half a mile east. Otis spoke soft, as if loud might bring something down on him through the ceiling. "Doc," he said, "I don't see movement on the corridor cam. I got a person at the far end of the tunnel waving a light. He's flashing 3 quick, 3 slow, 3 quick. That means SOS, right?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because a code from our grandparents' war had found us. "Yes," I said. "That's Manny. If he flashes again, tell him we can hear. Do not open." I don't know if it was Manny or memory talking, but the building's hum shifted then, a boiler cycling, a pump notching up. The autoclave gauge held steady, then climbed all the way into a zone I had never seen it hit. For the 4th load, the heat made the metal sweat. Lila stood with her gloved hands braced on her knees and her gaze down at the tile. "We're going to run out of straps," she said. I said, "We're going to run out of everything." We both nodded, because that admission felt like a relief. Now it wasn't about saving a building or a system. It was about getting to the next hour. When we ran out of straps, we used sheets torn in long strips. When we ran out of strips, we used electrical cord. When we ran out of cord, we used belts cut from hanging gowns. We reset the bleach on the tiles and watched it lighten the footprints until the floor looked like a map of decisions we'd already made. The stairwell door still thumped in a dull way that told me trapped bodies were forces, not people. And I held on to that distinction because if I didn't, I would see faces. Sometime after the fourth cycle, the intercom clicked twice without a voice. Otis had a tell like that when he was listening to two things at once. When he spoke, his voice carried a rough edge. "Doc, hospital pushed a message to my screen. City says stay in place. Do not engage. Wait for response teams. You got a number for response." His sarcasm was dust dry and almost kind. "What do you want me to do?" "Stay alive," I said. "If we go down, you're the last person who knows which rooms to skip. If anyone comes to your glass and talks like they think you owe them entry, tell them you are not allowed. They will bargain with authority. Authority is not here." He breathed a not quite laugh. "Copy," he said. "Authority is not here." For an hour and some, we worked in a loop of brace, restrain, transfer, seal, cycle. The loop makes time stretch and compress until you stop feeling both. The infected we couldn't restrain, we redirected with geometry and slipperiness until they fell, or we could tie them half to railings and half to each other, which is a thing we said without looking at one another. We didn't sleep, we didn't eat, we didn't check our phones even when they buzzed, because the list of what we couldn't fix would have crushed us. By the time the building's clocks flipped to 3 in the morning, the cooler was quiet. Isolation held. The stair door thumped twice every minute, steady as a metronome. The autoclave stood hot and humming with a 5th cycle done, and no one left to load. Lila sat on the cleanest piece of floor we could find, took off her face shield, wiped her eyes, and put it back on. I stood with my back against stainless and thought about my father's old rule from when he worked nights in a trauma ER. Nobody is coming. Then, the second part. You are somebody. Do the job. We did the job. We made a list of what needed doing next. Secure the specimens we'd collected before the horror began. Write the labels no one will ever want to see but everyone will want to read. Photograph the cooler doors because history is a wall you build with proof. Bleach the floors again. Reset the V. Move Brown from the isolation room to the secured staging area once we figured out a way that kept teeth far from skin. Check the corridor camera. Check the stairwell camera. Check ourselves for cuts we hadn't felt in the rush. We radioed Otis once an hour, not to chat, just to say we were here and to get his count. He started giving us numbers we didn't ask for. 3 at the far end, he'd say. 2 on the roof of the garage. 1 on the loading dock trying the roll-up with a tire iron. It kept him from being alone in the way the booth makes a man alone. Glass on 3 sides, and a gun he had been told to leave in the locker 10 years earlier. He said the hospital lights looked like a hive. He said the sirens had stopped. He said someone was running a bus into a barrier over and over like a hammer. Then he said it got quiet, and we all knew that was worse. When dawn broke, it didn't change the light on our floor. We live under fluorescents and LEDs down here. But the idea of dawn made my shoulders drop half an inch. The first thing I did with the idea of morning was call my sister and leave a voicemail with no content except the date, the time, and the sentence I never thought I'd have to record. If you are hearing this, do not open doors for anyone who doesn't say your name and mine. I hung up before I told her I loved her, because I didn't want the recording to end with a word that might be the last one she'd ever hear from me. We ate energy bars from the staff room, with our gloves still on, and our masks still pulled to our faces. We drank water we didn't need from a cooler that beeped every time you pressed the lever, because a battery had been dying for months, and no one had put in a ticket. We made plans for noon, as if noon were going to come the way it always comes. Lila laid out scalpels, and numbered them because order calms fear, when fear wants to empty drawers on the floor. I checked the autoclave's maintenance log and wrote a line that would make an engineer nod. Unusual duty cycle, held pressure, external vent satisfactory. Manny had done good work. At 8:15, the elevator dinged. It dinged because someone on the other side had swiped an override. Otis came on the intercom in the same instant. "Do not open that," he said. "They got a badge. They got a code. They don't got a voice I recognize. Do not open." The elevator doors did not open because I had killed power to our call panel. Whoever was in the shaft pounded the inner panel between car and floor. Lila looked at the seam, and then at me. We both shook our heads. The pounding stopped. 10 seconds later, something threw itself down the shaft. The thud came up through the tension cables into the soles of my shoes. There is a special fear reserved for the moments you realize your plan intersects with someone else's desperation. We didn't change our plan. We reinforced the elevator doors with the last 2 gurneys, strapped cross-braced, and taped a note to the steel with the thick marker from the photography cart. "Do not open. We are holding. If you are alive, go to security booth in garage. Say Otis Bell. Do not run. Running draws them." We wrote it 3 times, because people in panic read nothing the first time. The second day became a shape, I can tell you, and it will still sound like fiction. We worked. We checked for noises. We measured time by autoclave cycles, and by how often the stair door thumped. We briefed Otis every hour. He briefed us. At noon, he said a helicopter made a circuit and kept going. At 2, he said someone tried to shoot a padlock and missed and hit a door closer. At 4, he said Manny's light was off. He didn't say what he thought that meant. That evening, we cleared the isolation room. Brown's strap had worn a groove in the lift post an inch deep by muscle and persistence alone. We set a second lift forklift style and used the 2 arms like a clamp. It took both of us and a run of the saw where bone met steel. When we had him secured on a gurney with more straps than a field medic would have used on a spine injury, we staged him in the corner across from the autoclave and stood for a second with the common human impulse to say a name. We didn't. We had said his name enough. That night we slept in chairs in turns, 20 minutes each. The light stayed low and steady. The hall stayed quiet. The stair thumped without rhythm now, either because numbers had dropped or because the ones left had found something else to focus on, and only returned to hit metal when instinct brought them back to the place with sounds. Sleep comes like blackout when you've run your system into reserve. In my sleep, a 3-note click ran on repeat. When I woke, I realized it wasn't a dream. It was the sound the infected made in their throats when they weren't clamping teeth. I do not know if it was speech trying to work without voice. I do not think I want to know. On the 3rd day, a message from the county finally pushed through our hospital radio. The voice was calm and wrong, like a press conference in a hurricane. It told us to stay in place. It told us to expect assistance. It told us the federal teams were mobilizing. It told us masking was recommended. It told us to cover broken windows with plastic sheeting. It told us to use social distancing. It told us a list of things that were written for a different disaster. We turned the volume down and went back to the part where we had made our own rules. The first attempt to get us out came from men in jackets with no insignia and no names, who knocked on the glass of the garage booth and told Otis they had orders. He told them he had orders too. When they tried to badge in, he cut power to the motor so the door couldn't roll. When they tried the side door, he put his chair against it and leaned his weight, a big man putting his back into the one job left that felt like honesty. They left. He said they left in a hurry, like they'd suddenly remembered something urgent across town. We understood. Urgent is everywhere when the definition of human is wobbling. On the 4th night, our bleach ran low. We switched to peroxide solution, and it didn't slick the tile the same. We were careful anyway, because careful is what stays when everything else unthreads. We checked the autoclave door lugs for metal fatigue, because I was more afraid of that door blowing than of anything on 2 feet. We logged the cycle counts, more for our own minds than for anyone who would ever read the page. Lila wrote a line in the margin of the log that made me sit down for a minute. She wrote, "We stayed. Not we survived. Not we won. We stayed." We did not turn into heroes. We turned into people who had a job, and the job was to keep the place that handles the dead from creating more. I want that recorded because someone a year from now, or 10 years from now, will need to know that staying is possible, that fast, aggressive infection without judgment can be met with judgment and geometry, and a partner who does not flinch. I want it recorded that a plant engineer named Manny opened steam at 3 in the morning for people he couldn't see, and that a security officer named Otis used procedure like armor, and that a diner with hands steadier than mine kept numbers and straps when I needed a mind outside of panic. By the end of the 5th day, our floor looked like a map of a battle you don't put in textbooks. We had kept the cooler closed. We had not opened the door for anyone we didn't know by name. We had loaded the autoclave more than any sane manual allows. We had not let the infected out of the places where we could contain them. The stairwell door had stopped thumping. The corridor had gone quiet in a way that meant either triumph or desolation, and either one required the same response. Clean, prep, secure, wait. The first time we opened to the garage was not a triumph either. It was scheduled. That is how you win against panic. You schedule. Otis told us the timing when he could see the driveway empty, when he could count the shadows and call them none. We cycled the elevator power and rode up into his booth, masks on, shields down, tools in hand, like we were stepping into weather we didn't trust. The booth smelled like coffee and old leather and the kind of cologne grandfathers wear only on holidays. Otis stood up, and the way he did it told me his knee hurt worse than he'd ever admit. He said Doc and Lila like benedictions. Then he locked the door behind us and made us sit before we fell over. We didn't leave. The outside door had a city order on it and a piece of red tape that meant nothing to the desperate. The sky was an unhelpful perfect blue. Somewhere deeper in the district, a siren cut and then died. We could have run for it, tried our luck, gambled on speed. But the job hadn't ended when the cooler went quiet. The job had changed shape. We were going to be the place where families came months from now to find a name on a log and a location on a chart. We were going to be the place that told the story of the night the first body moved and what we did with that truth. So we went back down. We reset the V one more time because rituals keep people sane. We checked every strap, every latch, every lug nut on the autoclave door. We wrote in block letters on the whiteboard across the room what we had learned when learning meant survival. Distance first, disable mobility, geometry beats strength, steam beats bravado, doors are promises, bleach buys time, tape buys more, names matter, rules save the guard, and the doctor, and the student, and the engineer. And if you can stay, stay. When they ask later why we didn't just open up and run, I will tell them the same thing I'm telling you now. Fast infection turned people into force, and force ignores pleading. But force loses to leverage if you keep your head. When the first body moved in our isolation room, we could have frozen. We could have opened a door because someone knocked. We could have made the kind of mistake you only make once. Instead, we obeyed the boring words written on laminated cards by committees. We made them ruthless in the right direction. We kept a floor that belongs to the dead from becoming a floor of the dying. That is what staying means. I don't know what City Hall will write. I don't know what the state will say on a podium. I don't know what that first ward will be called in the histories of this outbreak. I know what we will call it. The night we learned that the infected moved too fast for grief, and that the living can still be faster if fast means smart. I know that my hands will always remember the wheel of the autoclave door, and that my face will always remember the N95's lines. I know that if you're hearing this, if you're alone in a building that was never meant to hold, if the door is strong and the light is steady and a name is what someone asks you for, ask them for yours as well. Then decide if you are somebody. Then do the job. Yeah. And if you're the person in the booth watching a monitor while the world scrapes itself raw outside, you are not just a guard. You are the reason people like me can stay. Learn names. Keep rules. Count steps. Call out lie when a man in a jacket with no name tells you he has orders. Remember that many doors are promises and some doors are traps. If a light flashes 3 quick, 3 slow, 3 quick in a tunnel, and you can't save the man holding it. Open steam for somebody else and make the next cycle hold pressure. We will write the charts. We will number the racks. We will put the notes beside the names. We will tell families the truth. Not because truth is gentle, but because truth is how other people live through the same math. The night the first body moved at the county morgue, we stayed. That's the whole of it. Everything else is detail you put on a page, so the next person knows where to stand when the door bows, and where to place the lift when the strap needs a second anchor. If I've learned anything from a city that doesn't sleep and a building that holds its breath when the elevator stops, it's that staying is not passive. It is an action. It is a weapon, if you let it be. When the next wave comes, and there is always a next wave in cities like ours, we will be here behind steel and procedure and the ugly competence that no one puts in a movie. Fast or slow, walking or sprinting, confused or intent, it comes to the same thing in the end. You either open or you don't. You either make geometry do work for you, or you scream that it isn't fair, and you bleed on a floor that doesn't care. If you want to live, make the world boring. Make it rules, and straps, and cycles, and tape, and bleach, and a whiteboard with lessons written large. Make a morgue into a fortress without forgetting it is still, at its core, a place of respect. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.